At this point, we've built out all our plans. Now we need to see if they're actually as good as we think they are. We need to confirm that we've taken all the eventualities into consideration and that everybody knows what we need to do in a disaster. And we do this in several distinct phases. First off, we do a DRP review. This is done by the team members who are part of the DRP team. Everybody reads over the plan and we look for any glaring omissions, anything that's missing, any large gaps, anything that logically doesn't make sense. Then we do a read-through or a checklist. This is the managers and the functional areas that are impacted by the DRP that goes through and makes sure that everything they need for the disaster is something they have. If an engineer needs a laptop with a MiFi, or we need a certain program to ensure that our recovery is quick, but we don't have that, this is the time we would buy it. We read through the plan to ensure that everything we need for the disaster is something we already have. Then we do a walkthrough. It can also be called a talk-through, a tabletop exercise, a structured walkthrough, something like that. This again is the managers and the critical personnel from all the key areas that sit down and talk through a disaster scenario. Then we do this, then we do this, then that team does that, then we do this. This is done to see if there are any gaps, anything that's missing, something that's not the right way to do it technically, or if something's just not feasible to do. At this point, we don't actually do anything. We just sit down and we talk it all over. Then we do a simulation test or a walkthrough drill. It is very similar to the walkthrough, but it is also slightly different. Do not confuse them. And the main difference really is, here we sit down and we simulate an actual disaster and each team does whatever they're supposed to do in that scenario. And at each stage of the different tests, if there are any issues, any omissions, something we need to add, something we need to fix, we do that before we progress to the next stage. At this point, we do believe that the plans are pretty good. We have everything covered that we need, and we should be ready for an actual disaster scenario. Then we do physical testing, because how we think something's going to work and how it's actually going to work are not always the same. And all of these assume we have a second site that we can bring traffic over to. So first off, and least intrusive, we can do parallel processing. This is where we bring the critical components up at our secondary site using our backups, but the primary system is still up and running at our primary facility. We don't touch anything. At the end of the day, when we have the last backup, we compare the two systems. Are they identical? If this is something we've tested before, we can actually do the parallel processing where we run the two applications as an active-active pair, assuming we're set up for that. A partial interruption is us interrupting a single application and failing it over to our secondary facility, and we would most often do this outside of business hours. We have this payroll system. After 1800 or 6 p.m. it's no longer in use. At 7 o'clock we fail over to our secondary facility, and then we have the payroll department test if they can actually use the system as they normally do. It really has no impact because the payroll department is not working at this time, but we can still see if we can process at the secondary facility. And then a full interruption simulates what would happen if the disaster was so bad our primary site is completely gone or inaccessible. We interrupt and fail over every single application we have, or at least the ones that are deemed critical enough where we have them built out on the secondary site. We then fail the traffic over and then we test all the systems, and this is always done after hours. We would have the teams that normally use the applications come in and test to confirm they actually have normal functionality. The times I've been part of this, we've started at 2 in the morning on a Saturday, and then by noon or somewhere around there, we would be done for that day. Everything would be tested, everything would be happy. We might have found some errors, but we know what to fix before the next time. And then we fail the traffic back to our regular production systems at the primary site. And both the partial and the full interruption obviously assumes we have that fully redundant system that we can fail traffic over. If we don't, they don't really make a lot of sense. If we have any of the other solutions, the ones I talked about earlier where we might have a cloud solution, every so often we want to test that it actually functions. Where we fail the traffic over to is not as important as it is that we test it. And we do all this testing to ensure that the plan we have is accurate, complete, and effective. And we always do all this testing before we actually implement the plan. And when we do the simulated failovers or the actual failovers, these are the drills I'm talking about, the exercises. This is us going through the plan, and the main focus here is train the staff so they're ready for when something happens. We train the staff, we improve their response, They know exactly what to do when we have an actual disaster. You can think of this as the fire drills we talked about earlier. Once a year, we do a fire drill. That way, staff knows what to do in the event of a fire. And I do know that we actually do the fire drills because it's required. If we don't do them, we can get penalized. And that is one of the reasons why fire drills is one of the only drills most places do, because they have to. And once we're done with our testing, we've done the drills, then we could get the plan audited. Bring someone in from the outside that does this for a living that can help us make sure that the plan is understood, followed, and all the measures we have in the plan are actually effective. Just like any of the other audits we do, it does make sense to bring someone from the outside in who does this 40 plus hours a week, who knows exactly what to look for, who can help us to ensure that we actually are as prepared as we think we are. The reason why the military spends so much time and so much money in training and in exercises is because it works. Once something happens, whoever needs to do something, if they've done it 50 times before, they know exactly what to do. They're not confused, they're hopefully not overwhelmed, and they know this is what's happening, this is what I need to do next. And since we have clearly defined who does what in the plan, there's no confusion about, oh, I thought you were doing that, or I forgot I needed to do that. Everybody knows exactly their piece of the puzzle. And this is why we train the evacuations, the fire safety, the CPR, the first aid, and we do exactly the same with the DR plan and the teams that are involved in that. We train it over and over until they're comfortable doing what they need to do. This example here, where the employee is expected to restore a system from a backup tape but have never been trained, is another of my real-world examples. And this is from the place where they had the excellent DR plan, but it was 10 years old and there had not been made any changes to it the last 10 years. They sat down and you just read through it. Well, you are the data center guy. You need to restore from a backup tape. And the guy just looks blankly out and says, I don't know how to do that. I've never been trained. I don't know where the backup tapes are. I don't know how to get them. And this was discovered during a walkthrough. Then we fix that problem. We give him the training he needs to not only restore the system, but to get the backup tape, to insert them into the backup system, and to rebuild the application that he needs to. And many of these are examples that I've experienced, but there are obviously a ton of more scenarios that you need to think through. If the power goes out, will the UPSs automatically start kicking in? Will they activate the generators? In most places, the UPS is going to have 30, 40, 50 minutes of battery power, and at that point, if we do not have a generator, the power is gone. But is that power switch something that happens automatically, or is it something someone in the data center needs to go and flip a switch? One of the hospitals I worked at, we had a small data center where it was manual, but the IT staff at that hospital didn't know how to do it. In most cases, when employees don't do what they're supposed to, it is not the employee's fault. It is because they were not trained sufficiently. In this case, that is your fault. You are the IT security manager. You need to ensure that the staff has the training they need. And I'm completely aware that this is not how it works a lot of times in the real world, but for this exam, this is how it works. In many places, you kind of have to fight with the other IT managers to ensure that their staff has the time and money to do the training. And remember, back to domain 1, we give them the training to raise the awareness. The training is them actually being taught. The awareness is them knowing what to do with the knowledge. You can teach them all you want. If you don't raise the awareness, it does nothing. And at this point, we have obviously identified the critical staff. We have the redundancy in place, so when the backup administrator takes a 3 weeks vacation, it's okay. We have someone else who can do his tasks. And when we onboard new people, part of their training is also the disaster recovery. If we're hiring senior personnel, they would have a lot more responsibility. If we hire junior personnel, they might just need to be trained on what we do in incident response. And as I have said 50 times already, all our disaster recovery plans, the BCP, and all the sub-plans are an iterative process, meaning once we're done, we start over again. If there are no major changes in our environment, we should update the plans at least every 12 months. So every year, we update the plan. But if there are any major changes to our organization, we have to update the plan again, because we need to ensure that the changes that have been to our environment is incorporated in the plan. If we have an acquisition or we have a divestiture, meaning we buy another company or our company is split up to multiple companies, then we update the plan because there's going to be significant changes to our infrastructure, maybe our management as well. If we make any changes to our actual systems, if we have a new backup solution, if we start implementing new IP ranges, anything like that, the plan needs to be updated and reflect those changes. And obviously, if we had a disaster and during the disaster we realize there's a ton of gaps in our plan, we need to fill out those gaps so the next time it happens, not if, but when, we filled out those gaps and we're ready for the next one. And then the last one here doesn't always make sense to all of my students initially, but when we talk it through, it does. If there is a significant change to senior leadership, we update the plan. And we don't do this because there are actually any changes to our infrastructure. We do this because senior management are the ones that sign off on the plan. If half our leadership has been changed out, then all those new people need to sign off on the plan. And they may not want to. We might need to change some things. And there could obviously be 50 other reasons to change the plans. The idea here is it's an iterative process, we're never done, and when major changes happen in our environment, then we update the plans. This doesn't mean we start over. We build on top of the old plan, we make the appropriate changes, and then we go through the tests, the drills, the tabletops, all the exercises that we do to ensure that the new plan is as solid as it needs to be. And then once we've updated it, then we send out new copies of the new plan and remove the old ones. And it is actually a requirement for the people who have hard copies of the plans to bring them back. We don't want Bob and Jane at 2 a.m. to grab the old plans and start doing things that are no longer right. We obviously want to keep old versions of the plan, but we do not want there to be any confusion on which plan is the right one.